There's a poll that Fox News is sharing, and it's Trump right now among Republicans nationwide is at 33%, Carson at 20, Bush 8, Cruz 7, which I think gives us a pretty good idea of where the electorate happens to be. And so many people in media, especially in politics, thought that Trump would be so over with by now. But I happened to come across a couple of things over the weekend that immediately caught my attention, and I thought we might share a couple of them here on the program. Remember the name Fred Grandy? You may remember him. He was actually, for a while, he was a talk show host at WMAL in Washington, served as well in the House of Representatives, and was an actor. So he's got quite an interesting background. I used to be able to listen to his show periodically if I was driving through the D.C. area. A pretty good talk show host, too, I'll point out. He has a piece in the Charlotte Observer, which is a newspaper in Charlotte, North Carolina. He says the emerging consensus among conservatives in the commentariat, that would mean your David Brooks, and that would mean George Will, and also Charles Krauthammer, and Republican Party elites and special interest groups, is that Trump is an unwelcome upstart and a threat to the established order. He says, all true, and as such, Donald Trump may be rapidly becoming the heir apparent to a lineage of revered Republican presidents that stretches back for more than a century. And he mentions Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt got some celebrity, of course, after his troops, well, they say it was to charge up San Juan Hill. It was, I'm told, actually a neighboring hill during the Spanish-American War in Cuba. Made Teddy Roosevelt a national celebrity. He got elected governor of New York in 1898, shortly after that. And then he was such a notorious reformer, the Republicans wanted him out of the way. So they said, aha, we'll make him vice president. He can't do any harm there. Shortly after the election, he gets into office, and President McKinley is assassinated, and Teddy Roosevelt becomes president. And after that, warred with the Republican Party just as much as he warred with Democrats. Then Ronald Reagan. Grandy says Ronald Reagan is venerated as the apostolic father of modern republicanism, but he said Reagan's conservatism was not welcomed when he challenged Gerald Ford for the nomination in 1976. So he's apparently in Trump's camp at this point, which I'm seeing a lot of people out there who just appreciate the fact that Donald Trump is giving a giant finger to the establishment. Seriously, I know that as a description might be a little over the top, but I think it's probably accurate. Ron Fournier, who's a writer for National Journal, was appearing yesterday on Meet the Press on NBC with, the fellow there with a goofy goatee. Anyway, Ron Fournier was chiming in on this, and he thinks the country is at this point almost in insurrection.
The story of the cycle, the story of our times, is a dysfunction in our social institutions, especially government and politics, and the public's loss of faith in those institutions. And the public right now is very angry, anxious, and asking, what side of the barricade are you on? And right now, whether it's right or wrong, Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders, Carson appear to be on the other side of that barricade. And so I spent almost the whole summer up in Michigan, and I kept running into people who I start calling crazy butts. Crazy butts. They would say, yeah, that Donald Trump is crazy, but he's punishing the establishment, isn't he? That Donald Trump is crazy, but he's taking on the media, isn't he? He's saying what I can't say, isn't he? The country is really angry, and until somebody brings positive change or very negative change, it's going to keep growing.
I think that he's pretty much figured it out. Only took him all summer long. 10 minutes after 9 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story 62. And I believe we have a caller with us, too, on News Radio 1310 KLIX. You're on the air. It's that guy from outer space again, 736-0300, 736-0300. So not only, of course, was it Ron Fournier on the program, David Brooks, who's a columnist with the New York Times, claims to be a conservative, backed President Obama way back in 2008. He is just beside himself that Donald Trump is still having such a great showing.
It's like a mutiny, not a campaign. And the problem is that there's an illusion in this country and in the Republican base that you can govern by screaming. That Donald Trump, Donald Blowhard. Donald Trump.
On Twitter today. You just melted the internet.
Yeah, Donald Trump can just scream and somehow govern the country. But there's a democracy. You need a coalition. We have a very tough legislative system. And you got to have to actually have craftsmen. And there's insufficient respect for that right now among the Carson and Trump supporters.
That effete. Well, never mind. I'm just telling you this. Again, You can't govern by screaming. You need to let people like me handle this. You just sit down over there and I'll tell you who to vote for. You're up next, and you're on the air on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Boy, someone doesn't want to speak to me today. You'd think that perhaps people out there would be a little bit, if they're trying to get through, that they wouldn't bag it because they don't get on the air within 10 seconds. Funny, if you were calling somebody at a radio show in Salt Lake City or Seattle, you know what they would do to you? They'd say, first of all, a call screener gets in your way, and the call screener says, what's your question or comment? And you tell them. And then they tell you, all right, be brief, don't go off into a rabbit hole, get to the point. Then they put you on hold for anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes. And that's your option. That's your only option. We have another caller with us. You're up next, and you're on the air.
Good morning, Bill.
Morning.
The Republican Party is non-existent. It's asleep. We need somebody like Teddy Roosevelt, and I think Donald Trump is the guy to get us out of the hole. Because if we keep going the way we're going, we might just as well pull up the white flag of surrender and let anybody take this country over that so desires.
Yeah, I think that a great many people feel that the Republican establishment especially needs a good, swift kick in the pants, and he's been doing it.
Well, I have to give him a lot of credit. He's not going to take any garbage off these people, and I think even the foreign governments are going to be running scared of him.
Yeah. I think thank you for the call. I remember what the Iranians did when Reagan was inaugurated. They immediately released the hostages. They didn't even wait. They figured, you know what, tomorrow when he's not at any more inaugural balls, he's probably going to bomb the snot out of us. So you guys can all go home. Trump may very well have that same sort of impact. You're up next, and you're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story.
Good morning, Bill. This is Pat.
Yes.
And, Trump is as you were saying, giving the finger to the Republican Party. Our own congressmen here in our own state have done nothing to improve our national standings. They run around like whimpering little girls, and it's about time somebody stands up and puts the force on people and say, come on, let's get the men back in control again.
I think that you look at what's going on with President Obama, and the Russians are making threats. The Chinese are making threats. They're threatening our coastlines with submarines and with their aircraft because they know that the guy, after he said there's a line in Syria. If you cross this line, we're going to come for you. And, of course, Syria crossed the line. And then he said, well, let me draw another line. And the fact of the matter is, we're being tested right now by all of these people. And if we plan to still be a world player, you're going to need someone who comes in there two-fisted.
Absolutely. We need to have somebody who's got the guts to say, this is how it's going to be, boys, and if you don't like it, our big stick's going to take care of it.
Yeah, we still, for a lot of people out there, we still have a much bigger stick than the Soviets and the Chinese combined.
It's about time that somebody gets the fear of it. As Obama's let everybody become thinking that we've all turned into the French, and we need to start becoming Americans. And those three boys that stopped that train wreck shows that the Americans still have the greatness to go get the dang job done.
Amen. Hey, I thank you much for the telephone call, sir. 9:15, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 63. There are some people, though, in the Obama White House who still think the president is a pretty tough guy.
Now is the time to heed the timeless advice from Teddy Roosevelt. Speak softly and carry a big stick. End of quote. I promise you, the president has a big stick. I promise you.
Yeah. And to think if Hillary implodes, which I guess she is, that's what they've got to turn to. So really, the Republican nominee is going to win this next election by default. I think we're all pretty well on the same page. Even the Democrats out there are looking over their shoulders saying, disaster on the way. Bill Colley with you, as I pointed out. Our telephone number, 736-0300, 736-0300. Over at the Weekly Standard, a writer by the name of Jay Cost titles this, The Art of the Donald. Why has Trump risen so far so fast? He says, often immigration is just to introduce the idea that the political class is a bunch of dummies. who are getting outfoxed by the leaders of foreign countries, especially Mexico, and he will negotiate a much better deal. And he writes, he never gives a full, or a dull interview, rather, or a boring speech. Trump also has his finger on the pulse of the nation. Now, remember, I was mentioning Peggy Noonan in the last hour during the very same segment, corresponding segment. Peggy Noonan saying that most of your leaders just simply don't know and they don't care any longer because all they're waiting for is that satchel of cash from Wall Street. Trump also has his finger on the pulse of the nation, Cost writes, in a way that none of the other candidates except Sanders does. According to Gallup, the percentage of people who are satisfied with the way things are going in the United States has been below 50% since early 2004. And he writes that is a very long time. Yeah, that's over 11 years. Can you imagine that? Early 2004. For well over a decade. We weren't even into the implosion, the 2007, 2008 implosion with the economy yet. By the way, if we get to this a little later in the program, there are warnings that implosion was only delayed, and that if there's an interest rate hike coming up this week, oh boy, we could be in for some rough sailing. And how would that help the election chances for, you realize, Americans don't go out when they vote for president and vote for the performance of the House or Senate, even though they don't like those people. They go out and they vote based on the party in power in the White House. And, the Republicans, if they don't like Donald Trump and they don't want Donald Trump there, maybe they better be more responsive to the people. A friend of mine who was a longtime Republican got angry with the party and walked away from it 4 or 5 years ago. This fellow worked in the Reagan administration, and he was a close friend, actually lived for a time with George H.W. Bush and his wife during the course of the election in 1984-85. He was a diehard Republican, now refers to them as the Gone Old Party, GOP, Gone Old Party. And they're in danger of going the way of the Whigs. It was today 5 years ago. Today was a primary when I was still working at a radio station, which is barely there any longer, working in Delaware. This is the 5th anniversary of Christine O'Donnell defeating a guy by the name of Mike Castle, a wimp and a rhino Republican. And at the time, it really sent a message to the establishment, and then they wouldn't get behind her in the general election. Many of the Republicans ended up campaigning for the Democrat, who, by the way, just voted for the Iran deal. And I was just reading some details on that, but I can remember a few weeks before primary day, I was at an event where she was speaking, and I was talking with her before she went up on the stage, and she said, if this continues, the Republican Party is going the way of the Whig Party. Spot on. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com. Hey, I've got more coming up. Speaking of the economy, a couple of things I want to mention about that in a few minutes.